Hello, and welcome to The Hookshot on the Miracle Sports Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Nate. Today we're going to be doing our season preview for our Eastern Conference teams. So in this episode, we have ranked each team, or the whole Eastern Conference, 1 through 15, based on how we think they'll do in the regular season. And we'll start at the bottom and go to the top and see how our lists compare. Starting things out, my 15 is the Detroit Pistons. And if you listen to our last few podcasts talking about the draft and free agency and everything, the Pistons have been very active, that's for sure. And I've been a big fan of what they've done. I didn't think they really had a whole lot of direction. Like, before this offseason, this is way more than I expected them to do in the offseason. They traded away guys like Luke Kennard, which I don't really agree with. And they lost Christian Wood is another big one, although I think he just didn't want to come back.
Probably.
They got a lot of guys in the draft. I mean, Killian Hayes. I had Hayes as my number 3 prospect on my big board, and they got him at 7. I think it's a fantastic fit. It gives him a point guard for the future. And they got Sadiq Bey down at like 19, I think, which was one of the better steals of the draft, I thought, even being a little higher than maybe a guy in like the late second or something. And they got Isaiah Stewart, who I think was a little underrated, and I wasn't terribly surprised that he actually went as high as he did, personally. I think there's a lot of people overrating or underrating him. He's incredibly strong. He's a great team player, and he's really good down in the post, where if he can develop, it could be a really good fit. But they've done some possibly questionable things, like signing Jeremy Grant to $20 million a year for 3 years, especially when they still have Blake Griffin for another 2 years, probably, assuming he picks up his option. Mason Plumlee for 3 years, $25 million, which I think is a bit high. Josh Jackson for 2 years, which I like. Jahlil Okafor, 2 years, $4 million. I don't mind that money at all for Okafor. My only issue is if it maybe start blocking the development of Isaiah Stewart. But as long as he gets his money, Wayne Ellington, 1 year, about $2.5 million. They got DeLon Wright from Dallas. They got Zaire Smith, which I thought was a nice addition, but then they cut him, which I thought was surprising. They picked up Rodney Magruder, Zanin Musa, and yeah, there's a lot of turnover in this roster. Also, as we were recording this, a few minutes ago, Shams tweeted out that they signed LiAngelo Ball. Whether or not he makes the roster will stand to be seen.
No way he's making this team. There's no way.
I mean, there's certainly a notable addition, and I love the direction they're going, but I don't really see them doing much this season. A lot of these teams, even at the bottom of the East here, where we think the East is the weaker division, a lot of these teams still are decent. Like, I don't think any of these teams are really all that bad. And the Pistons, I mean, they should have Blake Griffin coming back. They have Derrick Rose still. Like, there's a very strong chance they're not the worst team, but I think that they got worse for the present is my big thing. Losing some of the guys they did. They got a lot of nice young guys, but they'll need time to develop and time to adjust to the NBA, where I just think they got a little worse for 2021. So they ended up being my number 15 team.
So I have the Pistons 13th, so I guess barely a little higher than you. I mostly have them higher than the other teams in my bottom, just because I think the other teams are worse rather than I think the Pistons are better. Like you said, I'm a big fan of Killian Hayes. I think he will be able to do something for them this year. And Blake Griffin coming back, I think he can still play. Probably not at an all-star level like he was before, but maybe an above-average player. Derrick Rose still has some life in him. I like Sadiq Bey. Sekou Doumbouya has some maybe potential a little bit. Jeremy Grant can play a little bit. I like the Josh Jackson signing. I think he's like turning his career around to at least being a serviceable NBA player. They finished 13th last year in the East. Like you said, they lost Christian Wood, who I think was really only good till the end of the season, and he probably didn't contribute a lot to wins, in my opinion. And then trading Luke Kennard, that is a loss in this team, but I think some of these rookies and some of these other people can fill in those gaps that I don't really see them record-wise being that much different than they were last season. So my number 15 is the Knicks. Let's see, they were 12th in the East last season, and I just think this roster like has nobody on the team. Looking at it, I see no one who's that good. Obi Toppin might be their best player, and he doesn't grade out as having the highest ceiling of many of the rookies. I just look at this roster and it seems really bare to me. RJ Barrett was really rough last season. Hopefully he does better for them. Michael K. Gilchrist is a name. Nerlens Noel is a name. Alfred Payton. Julius Randle is like decent. Austin Rivers is decent. Mitchell Robinson is pretty good. Dennis Jr. is not very good. Omari Spellman, who they traded for, is not very good. And to me, it just seems like after they waived all of these players, Bobby Portis left, Taj Gibson left, Wayne Ellington left. They traded multiple people. It just seems like this team is really just holding off for the offseason next season. I know they have Tom Thibodeau, and I mean, Tom usually doesn't coach teams that badly. Whatever you think of him as a coach, his records are not usually bottom of the league, but I don't know what this team's going to do this year. They don't seem to have anybody that reinvents them and puts a spark in them at all, which is why I have them last.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that to a decent extent. I had the Knicks at 13 on my list, and I guess the reason I had them just not at the bottom there is I mean, I've seen a lot of Tom Thibodeau. Clearly, we're both Timberwolves fans, so we've definitely experienced his coaching. I agree with that. I just don't think his team is going to be the bottom of the conference. I mean, I don't like Tom Thibodeau. He did a lot in Minnesota that wasn't good, but I just don't see him leading the team to the bottom. And I look at some of these teams, or some of the guys in this team here they brought in, and I think they can make some underrated contributions. A name that certainly sticks out is Alec Burks to me. He had a really good year last year, especially when it came to like Golden State, and
he was like decent. I don't know.
I mean, he did better than he had been doing. I think Alec Burks is going to be a really solid contributor off the bench, and I think it's better than what they had. I'm still a bit of a believer in Michael Kidd Gilchrist to be an impact player, like off the bench. Austin Rivers, I think, could maybe get some solid minutes at point. They got Alfred Payton back. Nerlens Noel is an upgraded backup center, I'd argue, and a good guy to have when Mitchell Robinson often finds himself in foul trouble. And Obi Toppin is probably one of the most NBA-ready rookies coming in the league. Emmanuel Quickly is another guy I was very high on, probably higher than most other people, and that's about where I thought he would get drafted. I think Quickly can certainly have an impact as well as a really good defender and three-point shooter. And that the three-point shooting, though, is still probably my main concern here. And I also think RJ Barrett is going to have a big step forward. I'd assume he's going to get a lot of minutes under Tom Thibodeau. And
yeah, probably.
I mean, I don't think his rookie season was quite as bad as some people will say it was. It certainly wasn't ideal. And I don't know if the roster has done really much this offseason to support him, but I think it's a better roster than they were last year. And they had a lot of young guys, and I'm trusting in those young guys getting better. As I said, RJ Barrett, I think will get better. Mitchell Robinson will get better. I don't really know about guys like Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina. I don't really know how much they're going to get better, but I'm really banking on those big two prospects and them getting better. And, I mean, they have guys like Julius Randle still there. I know Julius Randle is kind of hated by some people. He's not really a great fit for the modern league, and he's not a good fit next to RJ Barrett, which I completely agree with. But they're not just going to bench him because Obi Toppin's here. Tom Thibodeau isn't a big fan of playing his rookies, and Obi Toppin is not a good defender, which Thibodeau likes. So Toppin will have to earn his minutes, I expect. And I think you could probably argue that they might have the worst roster. I just don't know if I see them finishing as the worst team.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, going on to number 14, my number 14 team is the Cavs. The Cavs are a team I really wanted to put higher, but I just couldn't really find a team to put them higher, or I guess to drop down and move them higher. And I think a lot of it, like the Knicks, there's some young guys there who I think a lot of their development will be a big factor in how they do this season. Clearly their backcourt with Garland and Sexton. Sexton I had in my list of underrated players. He's about a 20-point per game scorer on really good efficiency. I think Garland's going to take a step up. Kevin Porter Jr. was starting to emerge towards the end of the season as a really good option. They got a guy like Isaac Okoro, who I think can come in right away and contribute on the defensive end, which I have no idea how much it's going to help open things up. But the Cavs I think they had the worst defensive rating in the league last year, so that certainly can't hurt. JaVale McGee isn't that bad. They got Andre Drummond now for the full season, Andre Drummond, as much as he can't shoot or do any of that, he's possibly the best rebounder of all time and contributes
Great
he has some solid
defensively.
defense, and he's decent in the post and everything. And they got a guy like JaVale McGee to back him up. Damian Dotson could be a nice shooter for them. Rajon Tucker maybe as well, just deep off the bench. They brought back Dellavedova, who I think is a solid depth point guard for them.
And Kevin Love. Kevin Love is still probably their best player. And he still can contribute pretty well.
Plus, you have the floor stretching ability of Kevin Love to kind of offset Andre Drummond down low. I really don't think a starting lineup of Garland, Sexton, Okoro, Love, Drummond is that bad of a team. So, I don't have them as worst team, but once again, I just couldn't justify putting them above other teams. Maybe I'd argue the Knicks, but not really over any other team. So they fell 14 for me.
Yeah, I'll keep this pretty short. I also have Cleveland at 14. I think they have more of a direction than the Knicks. And pretty much the sole reason in putting them above the Knicks is, like you said, their starting lineup isn't really that bad. Colin Sexton, I think, can be a true scorer. Kevin Love is still an above-average starter. Andre Drummond has his very set role. Isaac Okoro will come in and be great defensively at the very least. And I think all those guys are just as good as pretty much anybody on the Knicks team. The only guy you can maybe throw in there is Obi Toppin, for example. Julius Randle, maybe. And they have some guys on their bench, more veterans of JaVale McGee, Dellavedova, I guess Kevin Porter Jr. if he turns around. So, while this team was the worst team in the East last year, I don't know how much record-wise they will improve, but I think their starting lineup is good enough to at least not be the worst team. So moving on, 13 as a summary, I had the Detroit Pistons and Nate had the New York Knicks. So moving on to 12 for me is the Charlotte Hornets. I just am not a big believer in this Hornets team personally. The big highlights for them are trading for Gordon Hayward, drafting LaMelo. That's like their big guys they brought in. They were ninth in the East last season. And to me, part of that's a fluke. I'm not a big LaMelo believer. I don't think he will be good at all this season. Gordon Hayward, I think, is probably their best player, but I just kind of see him replacing some of the scoring done by Devontae Graham or Terry Rozier, and I don't think Gordon Hayward necessarily brings that much to the team. He definitely adds depth on their team, but I don't think he is going to necessarily help the winning all too much. Devontae Graham could maybe take another big step this season, but I am not super high on him. I think he was kind of just someone has to be good on this team with a bad team. Miles Bridges is an okay starter. Grant Riller is a guy they got who can be good in the second or good off the bench. And the rest of their lineup just doesn't really excite me. So I have them 12th. I think they've got a better roster than the previous teams we've discussed, but I like the other teams in the East better than them. But this also was a team that I thought was the worst roster last season, and they still finished ninth, so they could, and I'd probably say they have a better team this year, so they could really be a lot higher when the standings are finished.
Yeah, I had the Hornets all the way at 8, which would put them in the play-in bracket for me. And a lot of it has to do with what you just mentioned there with how much better they performed last season. I think a lot of people thought they'd be the worst team in the league, and they certainly surprised a lot of people. And I really just see them building off of that, which is the main reason I have them so high. A guy like PJ Washington started off really hot. He cooled off as the season went on, but I think he can make a little bit of a jump in year 2. And he's a nice option to stretch the floor. I would also love to see him play some minutes at center. I know he's only 6'7", but they played him a little bit at center, but I'm a big fan of him at center there. And the big one clearly is Gordon Hayward. They gave that big contract to Gordon Hayward. And I think people are just kind of forgetting how good Gordon Hayward is. I think he's a little overshadowed on the Celtics with as many options they had. He came in, clearly had that gruesome leg injury, but I think he's recovered. And the Hornets, as surprising as they were last year, I feel like the big thing they were lacking is a star. And while Gordon Hayward isn't like a big superstar, I think he's clearly the best player on the team. And he can come in and lead that team from kind of a spot they needed a guy to play. And I guess a lineup I would love to see, speaking of Washington at center, is like whatever 2 guards you want to throw out there. They have so many guards, whether that's like Graham, Ball, Rozier, or what. Then Hayward at the 3, Bridges at the 4, and Washington at the 5. I think it could be a very successful lineup. And going off that guard depth, I don't know how much LaMelo is really going to contribute year 1. I mean, I think his playmaking will open some things up, but I don't really see LaMelo being a big star in year 1 or anything. But that's okay because they still have guys like Devontae Graham, who I talked about him in my overrated players. I think he's both kind of underrated and overrated, but I don't think enough people talk about some of his negatives and like how bad he is inside the 3-point line. But he's elite from the 3-point line. Very high percentage on a lot of attempts per game last year. And I think he might be able to have a different role this season. And it might be able to make him more efficient. And LaMelo definitely gets some playing time. Vernon Carey is a guy I'm not like crazy high on, but I could definitely be surprised by him. I mean, he put the production in college, and Grant Riller, I think, is one of the biggest steals of the draft. He's older, but he's ready to go. He's a terrific scorer, an absolutely elite finisher, and they really only lost like Willie Hernan-Gomez, if I'm seeing that right. I mean, like Nick Batum too, I guess, but they didn't really lose a whole lot. They certainly got better, and like they were the 9th seed last year. I think they got kind of significantly better when they add Hayward and LaMelo Ball. So yeah, I see them building off of that and being the 8th seed. Going
All right, who do you have number 11?
I have the Washington Wizards. The Wizards, like I've said, with a team like the Pistons, the Cavs, kind of, are a team I want to put higher, but I just don't really feel like I can. I think the big question, obviously, is John Wall. He's coming back. How will he perform? Bradley Beal, I think, is a much different player than he was like 2 years ago when he last played with John Wall. I think Beal's that star, and we'll see how John Wall supports that. But when those two were playing together, the Wizards were pretty much a lock for this area, kind of. I mean, maybe a little higher. A lock for probably like the 7 to like 9 seed, kind of. Which in next season, with the new plan, will kind of be in the play-in, which is where they're usually sit. But they got some other additions. Jenny Avdia is a guy I was super high on in the draft. I think he was a big steal for them at 9. Cassius Winston could maybe come in and contribute. He seems like he might be NBA ready. Davis Bertans they re-signed, and with the amount of money they gave him, I would expect him to come and maybe start or have a little bigger role this next season, which I think is a great thing because he's just an elite shooter. And there'll be a little natural progression with guys like Hachimura and hopefully Troy Brown. So I think they could definitely be better, especially when you see what John Wall does. But there's just some other teams that I like better, which is the main reason I'm dropping all the way to 11 for me.
Yeah, I also have the Wizards at 11. I kind of like their team a little bit. I kind of want to put them higher, but I don't think Denny Avdia will contribute that much this season. I mean, we all know Bradley Beal is great. Davis Bertans, we'll see if last season was a fluke, but he's definitely contributes a little bit, or a good amount, I should say. I like Hachimura. I think he takes a good step this season and will be a pretty decent starter. John Wall comes back. It's been a long time since we've seen John Wall, and I think he will need a little bit time to adjust, but I expect him to be pretty good at least in the end. And Cassius Winston, I mean, he can contribute a little bit. I think he's NBA ready. But they do have Shabazz Napier at point guard. So who knows how much he actually plays. And yeah, I think I just have them. I have them better than the other teams because I think Bradley Beal alone is much better than anybody on any of the previous teams we talked about. But I don't really see this team quite competing for the playoffs. I think they need a little bit more depth to be able to do that, especially in the East, that I think is much better this season than they have been in the past. So also I'm sitting there at 11. And I believe, Nate, we skipped over your number 12 team, if you want to jump to that now.
Yeah, I guess my number 12, I had the Chicago Bulls. And the Chicago Bulls, I think their big key is the departure of Jim Boylan. He really hurt the team a lot. He closed off a lot of abilities, especially with their post guys I look at. Lowry Markkinen had a much worse year than he did the year before. And Wendell Carter Jr., I think, was really limited. He's a decent shooter, like from the mid range especially, and he was never given the opportunity to shoot from the mid range there. And he's also a really good playmaker, but Boylan never let him have the ball in his hands to facilitate anything at all. So I expect him to make a big step. Markkanen, I still don't like his fit with Carter. And if I had to pick, as I've said multiple times in this podcast, I'd pick Carter Jr. personally. But there's a very good likelihood he'll have a better year. Kobe White going in his second season, you would think would jump up. And they got Patrick Williams with the 4th overall pick. Patrick Williams has a lot of potential, but like some of these other guys, I don't see him making a big impact year one, especially less than other guys like LaMelo Ball, who I guess I just said that about. He's very raw. He didn't even start a single game in college. So he definitely needs some time to adjust. And I really like this roster. There's a lot of guys I really like on this team, but I just don't see them being a whole lot better than why I put them at 12. Just because, like, I don't think they got better. The only way they really pretty much got better is by firing their coach and getting Billy Donovan. And I think there'll be an adjustment period with a new coach, a new system, as hopefully players' abilities are more unlocked and they can learn to play with each other better. I think they have a really bright future, but I just don't see it this season. I think they're still a pretty bad team this year, so I put them at 12.
So I have the Bulls at 10, a little bit higher, and I would say I probably like the Wizards roster better than the Bulls, but I have the Bulls higher. I like Billy Donovan quite a bit. I think he's actually a really good coach, and I see them just improving based on growth as a team, and especially with the short off season. I think teams that have less turnover will probably do better. And the Bulls are a fairly young team that I think can just kind of take a little bit of a step next season. They finished 11th last season, so not that much better, but Lauri Markkanen, I could see kind of regressing back to the mean and being better than he was last season. Zach LaVine's always a solid scorer. Wendell Carter Jr., I think, can take a next step up. Otto Porter Jr. is pretty good. Kobe White, I think, will definitely improve in his second season. And Thad Young is a serviceable, pretty good veteran. I don't think this team has a lot of depth necessarily, especially looking at their bench. But I think they will just kind of be an overall more solid team with just the change of coaching and hopefully putting players in a little bit better roles. So I have the Bulls at number 10 there. And then going to my next team at number 9 is the Orlando Magic. And the Magic made the playoffs last season as the 8th seed. And I think they're just going to be passed a little bit. I wouldn't say the Magic have a lot of standout names, but I think they're a pretty decent team. Vucevic is a very strong starter, pretty quiet though, around the league. Same with Evan Fournier. And they had Cole Anthony in the draft. He will be able to, I think, contribute a little bit. They still have Aaron Gordon. Is Jonathan Isaac coming back at the start of the season?
No, he's out.
I don't remember where his injury is at. He's out the whole year. Okay, never mind. Jonathan Isaac, while good, won't contribute that much. Terrence Ross can still play a little bit. Markelle Fultz maybe found a role in an NBA team last offseason. They got a few other guys on this team, and I think they finished 8th, and I don't see the teams below where they finished really taking that much of a step up to really pass them. And I don't really see them improving that much to really pass the teams in a much stronger East this season. So I have them finishing ninth, which I mean is still good enough to be in the play-in tournament with the top 10 seeds, but not really making a big run here at all this season.
Yeah, I kind of agree there, but looking at these last few years, the Magic always find a way to sneak into the playoffs, where no, I don't really think many people think about them as anything that great, but I think they're a really solid team that is kind of capped and doesn't really have a super bright future, but isn't going to be all that bad either. Um, Partially, I guess why I've said in the past year I think they should blow it up. I have the Magic at 9. I think this is about the right range, 9-10. I think they're probably a lock for that play-in tournament, which is like 7 through 10. And
Yeah.
but the big thing here is the loss of Jonathan Isaac really hurts. I mean, I'd say Vucevic is still probably their best player, but Isaac was the team's defense and like their identity on defense. He's just an absolutely elite defensive player, and now they lose that. Aaron Gordon has been in the trade rumors. He might get traded. I'm judging the team or the roster as they are now. I'd like the pickup of Cole Anthony. I'm really excited to watch Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz play together. I think Markelle Fultz we'll have to see how he progresses this year. I'd hope he can make a progression, but it'll definitely be interesting to see those two play together. They also got Chuma Okeke coming in now, who they drafted 16th overall a couple years ago, but he was hurt last season. So he's coming in for his rookie year, and I think he might be able to carve out a little bit of a role for him. But they're just kind of stuck, as I said. There's not really a whole lot to do, I guess. They got their guys in like Gordon, Vucevic, and Fournier, who are going to lead them to about this play-in area, but even if they make the playoffs, they're probably a round 1 exit. Getting to my number 9 team, I have the Atlanta Hawks. This team is arguably, I'd say, the most improved team over the last season, but they were one of the worst teams in the league, so I just don't see them making a big jump or like a big jump to like a very like solid playoff spot, like 5 or 6 or something like that, just because of like how bad they were, and pretty much what they have going for them, I think, is natural development is a big thing, and they added Danilo Gallinari clearly, but it sounds like he might be coming off the bench, and Bogdanovich, who I think Bogdanovich is going to be really good. I mean, they got Rondo, they got Chris Dunn, Tony Snell, they got Okongwu in the draft, all guys that can certainly come in and make immediate impact, and they'll certainly be better, that's for sure. But I don't know if I see this team actually making it just to that big jump that some people have them going up to, like maybe like the 5 or 6 seed. And I think defense is still a question. Chris Dunn is an elite defender. He might be able to play alongside Trae Young some, but like I don't know what their end of the game lineup's going to look like, but I'd have to imagine it's like Young and Bogdanovich as the guards back there. And I mean, you're going to have Capella, who's decent at defense, and then it's either going to be like a guy like Hunter or Reddish at the 3, or you're going to put a guy like Danilo Gallinari at the 3 and have Collins out there with him at the 4. And either way, no matter what you pick, the team still isn't that great defensively, and defense is really important when you close out games. So I don't know how that will go. I mean, Trae Young had an insane improvement from year 1 to year 2. We'll see if he improves much from year 2 to year 3. A lot of their guys are just getting older. I think a big factor could be if one of their picks from last year breaks out in Reddish or Hunter. Reddish was really, really bad at the beginning of his rookie season. His efficiency was horrendous, but he started getting a lot better towards the end of the year. And Deandre Hunter, a guy who a lot of people thought was probably more NBA ready, came in and kind of disappointed, but there's still the option for them to get there. And I think they're clearly a much better team. I think they're really deep. They're going to make a big jump, but I don't see them making, once again, just that big of a jump. I think they're probably in the play-in bracket. So I have them at 9. They could very easily make the playoffs in that bracket, but I think this is just a safe spot to have them.
So I have the Hawks at 6. I have them really taking that big step up. I think they just added a lot of really good veterans on this team that's going to help their really young core just play a lot better and improve. Like you said, their additions, and then seeing Clint Capella finally actually play for them this season is going to make a big difference. I like the increase in defensive abilities they brought in with guys like a Chris Dunn, like a Rondo's okay defensively, Onyeka Okongwu is a strong defensive player, and Reddish and Hunter, I think, have to pretty much take a next step up this season based on just where they were as rookies. And then you just have, I think they're going to be a really, really good offensive team. Trae Young, obviously, borderline one of the best players offensively in the NBA. Gallinari is a pretty much automatic 20-ish point scorer a game. Bogdan Bogdanovic has improved every season he's been in the NBA, and he's kind of hitting his peak athletically, you would think, right now. Capella can be an elite pick and roll guy. John Collins has shown improvement every season he's been there. And then you have guys like Kevin Huerter, who will be good off the bench for them. Reddish and Hunter should be improving. Rondo is just kind of a strong veteran presence, maybe not necessarily in the regular season, but especially in the playoffs, if they get there. And I think this is probably the most improved team in the NBA, top 3 for sure. And I think some of these veterans can get some of these younger guys to start playing defense a little bit more and buy in a little bit more. Trae Young probably will still be really bad, but maybe he can at least be not the worst player on defense in the league. And I really just see this team, they might not finish as high as 6 with just all of the new pieces and the really short off season and time to gel a little bit. But I think at the end of the year, they can really hit their peak and win a lot of games, and maybe even a playoff round if there's a bit of an upset. So I have the Hawks all the way actually at 6. And then starting with my 8th seed here, I have the Indiana Pacers. And the Pacers were 4th last season. And I don't think they didn't make a ton of changes this year with a lot of their key guys. But I just don't see them necessarily getting much better. And I see kind of the teams around them improving a lot more. There might be some contention a little bit on this team with the amount of trade talks that Victor Oladipo, Miles Turner were in. And then none of those guys got traded. Sabonis was good last season. See if he can do it again. See what form Oladipo comes back. Same with Miles Turner. TJ Warren was great in the bubble, but that's also just the bubble. Hard to know how that goes. You have some other quality guys in this team, and I just don't see them falling out of the playoffs. I mean, their team is too good to not be a playoff team, but I think just the rest of the East is too talented and has too many good players that I think they'll just kind of sit at 8th. I think there's a big gap between them and probably a lot of the teams that aren't in the playoffs, but I don't really see them going too high up in the East this season.
Yeah, I have them at 7, and the main reason I have them at 7 is because I guess every team I have at 7 and above, I I see as firmly in the top 7. I think like I have my Pacers at 7, Hornets 8. I think there's a drop off between the Pacers and the Hornets and everyone else
Yeah,
below them.
definitely.
But I mean, the Hawks could be a team to certainly surprise there. But I had them at the bottom of those top 7 teams just because a lot of these other teams, the top, I think have either made big improvements just or have more star power or whatever it is. The Pacers played a lot of last year without Oladipo. Oladipo is, I don't know how he's going to come back and fit because 2 years ago when he was really good for them, he was kind of like the centerpiece of the team, but they had to adapt without him and they became really good. And Sabonis emerged as an all-star. I mean, TJ Warren was basically playing like an all-star in the bubble. Not saying he is, but I kind of question how his fit is. It really sounded like he wanted out during the offseason. They requested a trade. It sounds like there was some rumors. I remember Atlanta and Minnesota being in some of those rumors for trades. And but now he said he's committed. Yesterday he denies ever wanting out in the first place. He's also in a contract year, so maybe sometimes people play better there. But I think they're still going to be a really good regular season team. I think Sabonis could continue to get better. They have a new coach. I think Miles Turner could definitely take a step up. It seems pretty confirmed that he was offered in a Gordon Hayward sign and trade with Boston, but Boston didn't want to keep him, so they were exploring their offers, and Turner's value was extremely low, so they didn't take him. And that might spark something in him. I think he could be better utilized with a new coach. There's still clearly issues, though, with Turner and Sabonis. Clearly it takes Sabonis as the all-star, but some guys might be able to get better utilized. They didn't really add anything, and they didn't really lose anything. They were able to retain, especially Justin Holiday was the big one. He's a really good piece off the bench. Doug McDermott and TJ McConnell are two other guys I really, really like off the bench. I think Malcolm Brogdon is extremely underrated. He was kind of hurt a bit. Jeremy Lamb was hurt a little too. All those guys will be coming back. I really don't see the Pacers falling out of the top 7. I mean, as I said, though, if the Hawks do something, they could kick out a team. It could be the Pacers, but I just think the Pacers are probably a lock for the playoffs. I don't really see any way they drop off at all.
All right, so that was your 7 seed. So my 7 seed is the 76ers. And I think the 76ers could be a lot better than they were last season. They were the 6th seed last season. I like their coaching staff. Doc Rivers, always a great kind of high personality coach throughout his career. And Dave Yerger and Sam Cassell, some assistant coaches. I think those guys are quality coaches and can be quality coaches here in the NBA, especially assistant coach. And I have this team higher than like the Pacers because their star power, obviously Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, considering how good you actually want to say he is. He's pretty decent. And they traded away Al Horford, got rid of his contract in the offseason. Added Dwight Howard. Got Seth Curry in a trade. They drafted Tyrese Maxey, who I really, really, really like. And Matisse Thybulle maybe showed some promise in the offseason. So I think this is for sure a playoff team. I think this team fully relies on how motivated can Joel Embiid be. And apparently the Ben Simmons point guard experiment is over, possibly. I don't really know who's going to be their point guard then. So,
Yeah, I mean, Shake Milton, Seth Curry, neither are really
yeah,
point guards, but
no. Tyrese Maxey, I don't know.
once again, not really a point guard, but
No. But, so I think they need to figure that out. But I just think the teams around them are better. I think the 76ers lately especially have kind of wasted a lot of their talent. They could certainly be a team that's like top 4 for sure on this list. We'll see what Doc Rivers does. But I don't know. I guess just going more off last year, I have them lower than the other teams. But I wouldn't put them that far behind some of these other teams I have above them. They could easily be better than the Hawks, though I have the Hawks higher. But the Philadelphia 76ers could really just be in the mix next year as well.
yeah, I mean, I agree. They certainly feel like a top team. They have those two stars in Simmons and Embiid. Embiid, when he's fully healthy, is easily one of the most dominant centers in the league and one of the best centers in the league. Simmons, I think, is extremely underrated by a lot of people as well. I think he's elite in so many things. I think there's an argument for Simmons to be the best defender in the league. He's a terrific playmaker. He basically just can't shoot is his big thing. But I think if they move him to the 4, he could really dominate against some of the other 4s in the league right now, with his defense and his elite athleticism, and he's kind of bigger than just a lot of them as well. That moves Tobias Harris to the 3, though, which I'm not really a big fan of. I wasn't a big fan of the Harris contract when he signed it, and he didn't really live up to it necessarily last season. He had his best year, though, with the Clippers under Doc Rivers, so maybe Doc Rivers can unlock something out of Harris maybe a bit. And their biggest issue was definitely shooting, and they certainly did a lot to address that this season, this offseason, we got Seth Curry, who is an elite shooter, Isaiah Joe in the mid to late second round was one of the best shooters in the draft. And I got some other nice young guys coming in like Terrence Ferguson, Tony Bradley, Tyrese Maxey, where they have a lot of great prospects coming in, and I think the team's definitely going to be better. Dwight Howard's also a pretty notable addition there. I think the team should definitely be better, but I think there's just a lot of other teams. There's a lot of teams that will be better, so I just kind of have them at 6 for me. I think there are just 5 teams that would do better, so they fall a bit. And then I guess with that, going into my first of those 5 teams, I have the Brooklyn Nets, who I think they are probably definitely better than the 5 seed. I just think they're going to have some struggles in the regular season where they have a lot of ball dominant guys. Like Kyrie is pretty ball dominant. Durant could be kind of ball dominant. And Karis LeVert is pretty ball dominant as well. Dinwiddie handles the ball a lot too. Where I think the big reason I have them all the way down here at 5 is because I think there's going to be an adjustment period for sure. There's a very strong chance they might make a trade somewhere, but I think there's going to be an adjustment period for them where they have to figure out how they play together. KD, you never know if he might have issues coming back. Maybe he's got to warm back up to playing or what. Kyrie too, even coming back from injury. You never know what's going to happen. But I just find, looking at these top teams, I just find the Nets maybe having the most potential issues right away and stuff they have to figure out. But by all means, the Nets are definitely a championship contender. Their team is incredibly deep, especially at the top. I mean, with Kyrie, KD, Dinwiddie, LeVert, Jarrett Allen, DeAndre Jordan. They have a lot of guys who can contribute, and they're definitely a title contender.
Yeah, I have Brooklyn all the way at number 2, actually, um, just for how deep and good their team is. They are by far the most intriguing team, I would say, in the NBA this season, especially with Steve Nash as the coach, and how is he going to really navigate all of these different players who don't seem to fit well. But they also have Mike D'Antoni as assistant coach, who has had a lot of success. And there's multiple guys in this team who have won NBA Finals or gone deep in the playoffs. And honestly, I think Kevin Durant's going to come back and still be one of the best players. Kyrie Irving is still one of the top point guards. I think Deandre Jordan's almost a little underrated at this point. Karis LeVert is really solid. Joe Harris is an elite three-point shooter. They also signed Jeff Green, who can score a lot. Spencer Dinwiddie, like you said. There's just so many guys on this team that, and they all have good size. I think they can really match up well with any team, and it's not like there's one guy they can take away. Like, it's not, I don't know, it's not like the Rockets, who have James Harden, and you just take away James Harden and try to let it make everybody else do something. Or the Hawks, you take away Trae Young and make everybody else do something. But it's like, you take away Kyrie, oh, well, there's Kevin Durant, Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan, Karis LeVert. There's so many other people. Oh, you take away Durant, well, there's still Kyrie Irving and all the other guys that are just listed. And I just think that, yeah, the team will probably struggle in the beginning of the regular season, learning to play together, kind of adapting a little bit. But this team is too good and has too many good All-Stars and Hall of Famers and really, really top players on this team to be anything less than a top 3 seed, in my opinion. So I have them fall at 2. But moving on to the next team, I guess if we go back down the list, to my number 5, I have the Raptors. The Raptors is a team I was uncomfortable putting at 5. I mean, they won the championship 2 years ago. They were number 2 in the East last season. But I just like the other rosters on these other teams better than the Raptors. I think they're a team that's kind of slowly phasing out. I know I've said this on other podcasts. I'm not as high in the Raptors as a lot of other people are. But Pascal Siakam, maybe he struggled in the playoffs. Maybe people found out how to guard him. I don't really know. But he kind of was a little worrisome at the end of the season. They brought back Van Vliet, which is a good signing. I mean, Nick Nurse is one of the best coaches in the league. Kyle Lowry is getting pretty old at this point. But they also have some younger guys like OG Anunoby, who will probably get better. They got Malachi Flynn, who will not necessarily be the best player in the draft, will be able to contribute. And this team will probably be higher than 5th, but I just couldn't personally decide who they'd be better than. Maybe it's the Nets, because the Nets will struggle in the regular season to like build some team chemistry. Maybe another team takes a step back that's at the top for some reason. I don't know. I just kind of went purely roster based, and I just like the other rosters better than the Raptors.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that, but I think we kind of flip-flopped here where I had the Raptors at 2 on my list. You had the Nets at 2. I had the Nets at 5. You had the Raptors at 5. I mean, looking at the rosters, I think the Nets could arguably have the best roster in the East. But once again, I'm just kind of going off of regular season expectations here. And while I think teams like the Bucks, Heat, Celtics, Nets, maybe even Sixers may have a better shot at the title than the Raptors, I think the Raptors, year in and year out, keep proving that they're one of the best regular season teams, and I don't really see that changing this year. which is the main reason I have them at 2. I mean, they're big. The big keys here is they lost to Ibaka and Gasol. I think Aaron Baines will come in and certainly have a big role and take that over. And they re-signed Chris Boucher, who is going to come in and take probably that other spot there. And we'll have to see how Boucher can do. But every year, it feels like the Raptors lose something, and they just manage to find a guy who's maybe on their bench who can come in and take those minutes. And I think Boucher can do that. And I really don't think there's a big drop-off from a guy like maybe Marc Gasol to Aaron Baines personally. DeAndre Bembry is going to come in and be a solid wing defender off the bench. Malachi Flynn, who they got the 29th pick, I think I had 19 on my board. I'm really high on him. I think he can certainly make an immediate impact. They got Van Vliet back, clearly. This team is pretty much coming back. Gasol and Ibaka are the pieces lost, but with Baines and Boucher making that step up, I don't really think they're losing much there. They also got Alex Len, who can maybe get some solid minutes as well. I just don't really see this team being much worse than they were last season, at least in their regular season. So they were almost even with the Bucks last year when the regular season ended. So I have them at 2 just because, yeah, I think they're an elite regular season team. I have some questions about them in the playoffs, but I think they're going to finish that high in the regular season. And going on to my next team, at number 4, I had the Boston Celtics. Once again, kind of like the Nets, 4 might seem a little low, but the Celtics are certainly a title contender with their guys they have. But I just don't see them necessarily as quite as great of a playoff team or a regular season team, kind of like the Nets. I mean, they're going to be a top team in the East, and they're easily a lock for the playoffs, and I think that's really where they're going to make their mark. But I don't think they had anything too great for them in the regular season, off season. They lost Gordon Hayward, which is the big one here. They got Tristan Thompson, who I think he can be decent, but he's not the answer for center. I think a lot of people have been looking there. I think he's pretty similar to Tice, but Tice might even be better.
Do you think Thompson starts?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that too.
I don't know.
Tice. I think Tice might be better. I don't know. Maybe Thompson may have been a little hidden on Cleveland with some of their guys, especially when they got Drummond. And they gave him a pretty sizable deal for a team that has a lot of big contracts, with about almost $10 million a year. You think he's going to?
Thompson's a little bigger, barely.
Not really. They're both kind of undersized centers. But if I had to put a bet on it, I'd probably say he starts. But
I think so too.
I'm not sure. They got Jeff Teague, like a minimum. It's okay, but once again, as I said, we're Timberwolves fans. We've seen Jeff Teague a lot lately. He's
fine.
He's certainly known to just dribble out the shot clock a bit, which isn't ideal. He wasn't like anything special when he came back to Atlanta. I think it's an okay signing. I think it's definitely not as good as some people say it is. Ernie Smith is definitely, I think, going to come in and be a great shooter right away and a solid role player for them. And Peyton Pritchard, I'll have to see what he does. He's probably going to be behind Jeff Teague. And the big thing here with the Celtics is their trade exception with Gordon Hayward. I'm judging these rosters as they are right now. We don't know when that trade exception will be used. It's about $27 million, so they can clearly get someone really good for that, or they can get multiple pieces. You'd have to assume they're definitely going to use that. For what though? No one knows. Maybe they could use it for like a center. A guy like Nikola Vucevic I talked about a few episodes ago for the center. I wouldn't be opposed to whatsoever.
I don't think they're bringing a center.
But
They brought in Tristan Thompson.
probably, yeah. I mean, probably not. But I was thinking of how they could get better. But surely they're going to add something with that exception. They're not just going to let that expire. I mean, they went out of their way to negotiate that trade so they get that exception. That could certainly change something, but I have them here at 4 for the regular season.
Yeah, I have the Celtics at 3, so I mean, just slightly better. I guess we'll see this team is like. Kemba has been said he's going to miss the start of the regular season. Some knee problems. And I don't know. I like the Celtics a lot. They're kind of the team in the East I cheer for. And I think this team, I mean, obviously it starts with Jason Tatum being all NBA, one of the up-and-coming players. A lot of people say he's going to be a future MVP. So, I mean, he'll just probably keep getting better. Same as Jaylen Brown, younger, growing into his prime a little bit more. Should just keep getting better. Marcus Smart is their elite defensive player. Kind of the heart and soul of the team. I think he really brings a lot to this team that doesn't necessarily show up on the box chart, on the box score. Tristan Thompson is kind of there's another center. Him and Tice will probably play pretty similar minutes. Thompson just adds a lot more rebounding, and will probably help on that in the most compared to some of the other guys. I guess they would rely on a rebounding, honestly. I think Ernie Smith is a steal. He goes to a good team. He's not necessarily the top player defensively, so he probably won't excel on that side of the ball as much, but I think the team around him is so good that they can kind of cover that up a little bit, and he could just sit and be the absolute elite three-point shooter that he is, and I think his fit is really, really strong on this team. I just think this team's really deep and isn't changing out too many pieces. Sure, they lost Gordon Hayward, but I don't see that as like a big loss for this team. I think part of them, they felt like they needed to force some stuff with Gordon Hayward. I mean, Brad Stevens loves Gordon Hayward, being his college coach, kind of bringing him in. They're paying him a lot of money. And I think there's just like a lot of forced usage percentage at Gordon Hayward when that could maybe be used a little bit differently and a little bit more efficiently and a little bit better. So I think this team might actually be better without Gordon Hayward and giving some guys who are not as traditional or past superstars some more usage and just kind of making a little bit smarter play as a team. So I think this team is honestly better than last season. Not by much. I think most of it just comes from the growth of their younger players. And then hopefully Kemba comes back to his previous form for this team. And so I have them third, just due to probably lack of absolute elite superstars that some of the other teams above them have. So then we will jump to my number 4, which I just flip-flopped the team you at number 3, which is the Miami Heat. And the Heat obviously lost in the finals last year. They were the 5th seed. But I think what they gained in the finals is going to help them a lot in the regular season. I don't still see them being as an absolute elite regular season team. But, I mean, they have Iguodala now, and I think Avery Bradley is a really big, underrated signing for them. Dragic hopefully can stay healthy. They drafted Precious Achiuwa. And, I mean, this team was obviously already good last season. Bam should be better. Jimmy is Jimmy. Tyler Herro will likely be better, honestly. Duncan Robinson is a solid shooter still. And they don't change too much from last season. So I think that'll help them a lot, especially in the beginning. They already know how to play together, and they should be one of those top 3-4 teams, probably in the regular season and hosting some playoff games, assuming they stay healthy.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say on the Heat. I think
No.
the big thing with them is they found their identity now. I think that's pretty clear watching the playoffs. They went on a finals run clearly. And, I mean, the Heat, they look like they're built to win playoff games, which I think they're certainly a top contender, especially after what we just saw. But I think that's going to trickle a little into the regular season. Maybe not quite as much, but the Heat were definitely a new team last year, kind of. I mean, bringing guys like Butler, kind of the face of that team. Hero's a rookie. They certainly had to like find themselves, and I think they found themselves. So I've got them at 3 just because I just think they know what they are, which is more than what I can say about the Nets from my guess. The Sixers are new. The Celtics maybe a little, but I think the Heat, I mean, kind of my top 3 teams here, the Heat, Raptors, and Bucks, I think all are probably just the safest teams in terms of knowing like what they are, and that translate into regular season success. The big thing with the Heat on their roster, they lost Jay Crowder and Derrick Jones Jr. Crowder especially was a big contributor for them in playoffs, and that will hurt. But they got Mo Harkless to a cheap deal, and they drafted Precious Achiuwa with a 20th pick, and I think they could certainly fill the gaps there that those two guys left to some extent. They also got Avery Bradley, who I think he could give some solid minutes, but there's not a whole lot of roster turnover, and they certainly have a lot of guys on that team. Someone may always step up. You saw a guy like Bam step up last year. Jimmy Butler is starting to, I think, assert himself as one of the top players in the league, and I think they're just a pretty safe bet for that 3 spot.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to what you said about finding their identity, I mean, I think the Raptors, when they won the finals, found their identity, and even they were the 2 seed after Kawhi left. And I mean, the Heat aren't even really losing anybody that big as Kawhi Leonard. So I think they'll be a good regular season team. Probably higher than 4, but I just like the other teams better. So
yeah, and that brings us to our last team, which is both of our number 1 picks, the Milwaukee Bucks. I think simply the Bucks are the best regular season team in the league, probably out of East and West. I certainly like some other teams more for maybe my pick to like win or come out of the East for the finals this year. Like maybe the Heat, Celtics, Nets, I'd probably all maybe favor over the Bucks. But the Bucks certainly are going to be an elite playoff team. They added a lot of players, and they lost a decent amount too, though. George Hill led the league in 3-point percentage last year. That'll be missed. Eric Bledsoe is gone. I don't think his fit was ever all that great, but he certainly did contribute to that team. Robin Lopez or Sonny Leasova didn't really play many minutes there at the end, but they brought in a lot of guys who can certainly contribute. Drew Holiday is going to be taking Eric Bledsoe's spot. I think that's definitely an upgrade, just because I think Holiday, the main thing there especially is he adds a lot more offensively than Bledsoe, which Bledsoe's not bad by any means. Bledsoe was a very good defender for them last year, but I think Drew Holiday, especially in this Milwaukee Bucks defensive system, is, and I think there's very few guys in the league that can actually like carry a defense by themselves. I think Bam might be able to, maybe Rudy Gobert, and Giannis clearly I think is one of them, but there's not many players in the league that I think can do that, but Giannis is certainly one of them. They clearly just need a shot maker kind of in the playoffs, where Middleton is really good, but he's not really a big creator. Giannis isn't really much of a shot creator, just to like shoot shots really. I'm not convinced that Holiday is that guy either. but I think
No.
Holiday may have a better shot at being that than their other two. So with that, I'm still not necessarily buying them in as my favorite out of the East. They got DJ Augustine, who I think is going to be really good for them. I think Augustine has been pretty overlooked, considering he's been on the Magic, which is alone are a pretty overlooked team. Bobby Portis, they got a 2-year, about $7.5 million. That's I think he could certainly as well be a guy who plays well for them. Bryn Forbes at 2 years, $4.7 million. I don't know how Bryn Forbes was able to get signed for that cheap. He's an elite 3-point shooter, and that's certainly something they need to add. They also got Nick Stauskas coming back into the league. He certainly seems like he can be a good shooter. And with their 2 draft picks, they're able to get back in their big trade there. They got Jordan Nwora and Sam Merrill, who are both really good shooters as well. So they're filling the depth in this roster up with good shooters. And Torrey Craig is another guy that got a minimum deal, who I think can be a nice bench rotation piece. This team, I think, got deeper this season. They got better. And, I mean, when both of those happen and you're already the best regular season team in the league, I don't really see that changing. I think they're kind of a lock for number 1 in the regular season.
Yeah, I also have them number 1. Don't really have too much to add besides they kind of seem to always be the best regular season team. Giannis should obviously be up there for MVP, barring injuries. They brought in Drew Holiday. They've got other solid pieces around him. Dante DiVincenzo, I don't know if you mentioned him.
No.
Showed a lot of promise as a
Sure.
younger player. And he wasn't included in that trade that almost happened. Or he was included, but the trade didn't happen, so he's still on their team. And yeah, I mean, Giannis, Middleton, Drew Holiday. I think just the combination of those 3 on this team will catapult them or keep them at number 1, I guess. And yeah, that's the East. I guess, Nate, if you had to pick one team to go to the finals on the East, who would it be?
If I'm going off a roster, I'd want to pick the Nets, but I still have doubts there, and I'll have to see how they mesh. So if you're asking me today, I'd probably pick the Heat again.
My pick is the Nets. I think just the history on that team and the history of the players winning when it counts. And I think their star power is just too much. I think they can shut down Giannis. Obviously, Middleton can't be the guy without Giannis. So my pick is the Nets. I think they'll peak at the end of the season. But I'll just run through my list, 15 through 1. So I had the Knicks at 15, and then the Cavaliers, and the Pistons, and the Hornets, and Wizards, the Bulls, and the Orlando Magic. And then at 8, so being in the playoffs, the Pacers, the Philadelphia 76ers, Hawks, Raptors, Heat, Celtics, Nets, and the Milwaukee Bucks at number 1.
Yeah, I have at 15 the Pistons, 14 the Cavs, 13 Knicks, 12 the Bulls, 11 the Wizards, and then my play-in teams, I got 10 the Magic, 9 the Hawks, 8 Hornets, 7 Pacers, or I guess in my playoff teams, 7 Pacers, 6 Sixers, 5 Nets, 4 Celtics, 3 Heat, 2 Raptors, and Bucks at the top. And that will do it for this week. Thanks for listening. Make sure to rate us 5 stars on your preferred podcast platform. This will help other listeners find our podcast. Next week, we'll be doing this exact same thing, but for the Western Conference. So we'll rank all our teams 1 through 15 and start at the bottom and go to the top.
Yeah, you can find us on social media. I usually run through it every week, but it's actually just in the description of the podcast. So if you look there, you'll find them. And then we're also on YouTube at Miracle Sports Network, where we upload a delayed version of our podcast as well. So we will see you next week.